Now I'm very excited to welcome back Josh Nunn from the Action Network. You can follow Josh on Twitter at StepOnADuck1. Josh, thanks for coming back on the show. It's such an important weekend of handicapping, my man. But here we are, finally at the conference championships. How's your week going?
Doing really well, Kiev. We talked earlier in the week that this season just goes by way too quickly. You blink once and it's about halfway through the season, and you blink again and we're already to conference championship week. Feast week just wrapped up. It's a great time in the sports world, but it always just goes way too quickly. I know guys like you and I live and breathe college football 250, 300 days a year, and a lot of that time is spent waiting. And so we cherish every minute of the regular season, and we're really heating up now with conference championships and then playoff positioning. So it's really an interesting time of the season.
It certainly is, and I know you love college football so much, and it's got to be kind of tough to see it. But hey, at least it goes till the end of January now. I guess in a way,
Right.
It's just that we don't have the volume of games we're used to. I will tell you though, my Sunday mornings have opened up a little bit more because I've been spending those hours handicapping and doing power ratings and box score analysis, and so that's gotten a little bit lighter of a load. So I will welcome that. But the truth is of the fact is I do love college football so much myself, and you're right, it's surreal that we are here. But man, it is right in front of us. We have conference championship week. Lots of important things going on. But obviously the big news is, the committee. I mean, of course, right?
Yep.
We have to talk about it a little bit. Does it have to do with handicapping? Not so much, but maybe a little bit, because you want to kind of see what teams that you're going to think about at least for the next few weeks and who's going to be matched up with who and stuff like that. But I guess like right from the get-go, and I hate asking it like this because it's just a general question, but in your eyes, Josh, did the committee kind of get it right, or is there room for improvement?
I mean, just broad brush painting. I think that they did an okay job. I think that they really sent an interesting message with a couple of different teams, right? Tennessee is 7th. SMU is 8th, and they had kind of prerequisited this ranking with the fact that there wasn't going to be a lot of movement after conference championship week for teams in that top 10 win or lose. So they're kind of telling you teams like SMU and Indiana seem to be kind of firmly in the field. Now you're going to have Arizona State or Iowa State get in, and both those teams are rated 15th and 16th respectively, and so they will take a spot. And then the real wild card will be, I mean, what do you do with SMU if Clemson were to defeat them in the ACC championship game? Based on that current ranking of 8th, it seems like they might be safe, but there's other varying opinions that maybe they wouldn't be.
Well, the market says they wouldn't be because Alabama's minus 370 to make the playoffs, while SMU's only minus 135 to win the game. So that says that if SMU loses, the market thinks that Alabama's in, and they might be right. And I hate to say it, but the way that they spoke with the committee member, Reese Davis's interview with Ward Manuel, was that he's open to make that change. And I think that's the dirty part of the whole thing. It's like, dude, you're making these rules up just to kind of get an Alabama in. And what has SMU done so bad that they have to play an extra game? It's almost like if I'm SMU, I'd say, hey, you know what, guys? I'm going to defer. We're going to let Miami play this game instead. Being that we're ranked ahead of Bama, and you promise that the rankings will not change to the teams that don't play, we're just not going to play so you don't screw us. How's that sound?
No kidding. Yeah, they're almost penalized for that. And really, the SMU has really kind of turned it on in recent weeks and just had that one stinker performance against BYU earlier in the season where they couldn't score a touchdown and lost by 3. Otherwise, this team has been rolling, and it's not a team that I would want to play in the bracket.
No, not at all. It's funny, too. You look at these rankings and everything, and it's almost mind-blowing that they would bring a team that lost 3 out of their 8 conference games. That's about 40% of their conference games. You mean to tell me someone that can lose 40% of their conference games can make the playoffs? Don't get me wrong. Alabama's in the top 8 of my power ratings, at least. But they never went by power ratings. They have the high ceiling, but they have an extremely low floor. I mean, where we because the problem is they make rules to benefit them, which kind of bugs me a little bit. Looks like you got Fan Ridge. OB Bridge says go duck go. So what's up, Ridge? Thanks for stopping by. But here's something that I kind of looked into that didn't make a lot of sense. And sometimes you got to go deeper to show how they just make up stuff. Here's Syracuse's schedule. I'm going to share the screen here so you guys can see. You know what's interesting about Syracuse is they have 3 losses, right? I'm on South Carolina. Let me switch over to Syracuse here. What's interesting about Syracuse is that they have the 3 losses like Alabama, but they also have wins against top 25 teams. They have a win at UNLV, and they have a win at home against Miami, who was about in the top 6 or 7 when they played them. Now Miami's still top 14. So I mean, it's almost like Alabama's. They still give Bama the nod. Bama had that extra win, sure, but why are they ranked 22? I mean, this is what you're talking about. You know, what'd you do for me recently? Well, they just beat Miami, you know. Then you look at Clemson's record, right? Let's pull up Clemson, who's ranked, what, 17? Something like that?
9-3.
Go ahead again.
Just they're 17th in the ratings, and they're 9-3 overall. 2 conference losses.
17th in the ratings and 9-3 overall. So when you look at that, Clemson, they have 0 wins against top 25, like 0. And they have 3 losses, just like Syracuse. Why the heck are they 5-6 spots ahead of Syracuse? It absolutely makes no sense to me, Johnny.
No, you're getting a little premium for brand recognition and the previous success. Couple things to recognize too with the committee is they've come out forthright and said that their dissemination of these teams towards the back end of the ratings is not necessarily to try to find the team that's most deserving, but in their mind, it's to try to pick the best team to put in last. And so that's got one element of it. But the other thing is, you know, this is a TV show. And what do the TV ratings bring, and who do the people want to draw the most money? I mean, it's a TV show. So, I mean, Alabama's going to get that call every single time. It'll never be Syracuse. It will rarely ever be any of these other teams.
I mean, you nailed it there, of course. The networks are the true bosses. They're the true thugs. They're the true leaders, the true mafia behind it. But no one ever admits that. They're just like, well, I guess just people are sick of being lied to. Why don't he go up and say, well, Alabama's going to draw more money. They're going to draw more people. They have a lower floor, but they have a higher ceiling. So we're going to rather see them. I mean, if you could just be honest, if you'd be like, okay, well, thanks for being kind of corrupt and biasedly honest. But at least you're honest, you know, instead of all the like tit for tatting and making up rules as they go, because they could have used the same thing when they did Baylor and TCU years ago, that their recency was great, their top wins. I mean, they just change it for that. But that's what bugs me is they could actually have parameters, like you can't have 3 conference losses, or you have to schedule someone the year before that was in the top 25, kind of like Indiana scheduling the national champion and the co-national champion. You know, I mean, they could have parameters, but they don't, because they want to obviously do this for the network. So I think Alabama's in, and SMU. If I was SMU, I personally would not want to play this game. But at the same time, they do want to win the conference, and Clemson would have a big problem if they couldn't get in either. So there you go. There you have it. We still have to deal with the politics involved. And unfortunately, you know, Georgia, nobody's talking about, and Reese Davis did not ask about how close of a loss that was against Georgia Tech, who is one of Miami's losses, by the way, when it went to 8 overtimes, and the ref literally screwed them by not calling a targeting penalty. That was a loss for Georgia. That targeting would have made it a loss. That did not happen. So it's just crazy looking at this. But you know what, Josh? I could sit here and just complain all day about this. So could you. The bottom line is we have games to handicap, because that's our jobs, and that's what we're going to talk about, man.
Yeah, and one last pin on this, and then we'll close the chapter on this. Really take some mental notes on the way that the ratings have come out and the teams that were showing favor. There's nothing prohibiting any of us from betting into that in future years, right? So if you file some of these nuggets away for next year, you can bet into some of these principles that the committee has established. Whether you agree with it or not, there are still some money-making opportunities in the future as well.
Absolutely. That's a great
That's
point.
what we're here to do, baby. We're here to get to the window.
All right, well, let's get into it a little bit. Here to make the money. That's what I love to say. Rich says the ratings. Let's move into the next question then, and it's buy low, sell high. I decided to bring this back for this segment, even though you're like, why so late in the season? Well, because it's bowl season coming up. I think bowl season is a great opportunity to make money. And buy low, sell high, there is some, obviously, things to look at right now. So, for example, I could say this. I could give you a ton of sell high stuff, but I don't have quite lines yet. It sucks that people are already opting out. But a team like Miami, I don't think they're going to have anybody in their bowl game. And I'm hoping Cam Ward and the rest of this team does not say that they're going to the NFL draft until I get some sort of a stupid line from the books on their next game against like a South Alabama, too late. I get whoever they're going to play in their bowl game. Holy cow, would that be wonderful? That's what we're looking for. So to be honest with you, I'll start with sell high. I'm going to say anybody like Miami, and including Miami. Is that fair?
Yeah, Miami, Ole Miss. It could be Missouri, it could be any of those teams. Yeah, whether you got players that have one foot in the portal or to the NFL draft, and you just have this mass exodus of personnel, which we are already seeing. The transfer portal has just been bursting at the seams since the regular season ended, which was 3 days ago. And so we've already got a ton of players. That's already happened at the FCS level where 500, 600 players have already declared that they're going to be gone. And you'll see more and more participation opt-outs from these bowl games this year. That's really a good look to think about these teams that were just on the cusp and teams that were in the conversation for the playoff all year, just to see it slip through their fingers at the end of the season. Yeah, I could see there being a lot of disengagement from those groups.
And you can always look at the draft boards too, see who's kind of up there, because there's probably a few group of 5 guys in the first round, which you always want to look for, like Mitchell was a year ago and all that, So I think that's very important to do that and to do that exercise. Just look at Mel Kiper's or anybody's draft board right now. It's way early for them to have it be it right, but it tells you if these kids are going to opt out or not, because you would not want to risk injury for a bowl game. Now, so that's fair. Should I just use Ole Miss for you for their sell high? Is that fair? Or do you have another one?
I got a couple, right? So, USC 6-6. Why are they showing up in their bowl game, right? There's been a lot of up and down season, and it seems like year after year USC fails to show up. Liberty, I could see not showing up, right? Caden Salter's in the portal. Jamie Chadwell just got hired at another job, so they're going to be scrambling there with a little bit of personnel and inconsistency in the coaching staff. Washington State has completely fallen off a cliff, right? Washington State was kind of one of the darlings quietly in the Pac-2, and there was some ridiculous talk about them making the playoff, and then they go out and lose outright their last 2 against New Mexico and Wyoming. I could see their group finding, it's one of those teams where maybe they see a ton of people portal out and try and get into that Power 5 type of level now that Wazoo is no longer competing in that. Arbuckle just got hired away as OC, so I could see Wazoo struggling in their bowl game, as we've seen historically from Washington State year in and year out anyway.
No, absolutely. I agree with you 100%. I thought it was funny that Wazoo was talking about that and their fans. It's ridiculous. Stop, please. Stop. You also Wyoming, which thank God I changed my survivor play from them to Oregon, and I had to burn Oregon for it, but it was a smart play because I'm still there. We'll talk about that for a minute. Ridge says Colorado is showing up, and yes, Dion says they're showing up. And I got to tell you, Brad Powers put a tweet out there, and I totally agree with him. That's the coach you're looking for. That's all the hate that Dion got, dude. This is the guy that you want to lead your team, right? Having the guys show up, having a problem with it, talking about commitment, talking about family and things like that, dude. Props to Dion, man.
Well, and the culture and his baggage that he brought with him from Jackson State, and his guys and his children are playing on the team, and his son Shador is going to the NFL after this. This is one final hurrah. I agree with your sentiments and with our guy who chimed in here, Bridge. I think that Colorado is 100% showing up. This is not going to be a situation where they put up a stinker. I think it's one final time as the group for them to really put something together and impress in their bowl game before a lot of those players exit. And a couple other buy low. Well, it's not really a buy low, but a couple bowl situations to always keep in mind. Service Academy teams always get up for their bowl games. Army and Navy traditionally play really, really well in bowl games, especially if their bowl is located and situated in a place that has a military presence like Texas or San Diego or some of those places, because they use that event to recruit people to the service. And so it's really one of those things to dive into, but I could see myself really trying to find value in the service academies come bowl situation as well.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that. And what Rich said about Army, yeah, absolutely. He thinks Penn State's going to get destroyed. So he said after that, buy low on them. I'm not so sure about that, man. I'm not so sure Franklin's going to get his kids up. Maybe he does. He does sometimes, but he's going to have some people opt out too. Sell high. Or sorry, buy low. We already did sell high. My buy low, I guess, would be anybody I mentioned, like a South Alabama that's going to have an opportunity to, face somebody decent, especially a Tulane, because Tulane's out of the playoffs, but they're going to want to make some noise against a beat battered down USC team, like you mentioned. I think those are some candidates that you could buy low. Anybody that's not going to have a lot of opt-outs that will be motivated, just like you said in the service academies, Josh.
Yeah, and then you know what? A lot of these bowl games consistently have historical conference tie-ins, and so there are some unique bowl situations too where a lot of the conference participants always find a reason to show up, right? Like you've got the famous Idaho Potato Bowl, which is in Boise, and the MAC team always finds a way to show up against a middle-rated Mountain West team who could care whether or not they be there or not because they play on that field every other year anyway, and it's a unique situation for the MAC team. So it's interesting, too, to find a setting where one of those participants has maybe been there recently and it's kind of ho-hum to them. And then another group, it's like, wow, this is a really cool experience. We're going to give it our all.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Now, Rich says loser of Boise UNLV potentially. Now, I say be careful because Genty ain't playing no bowl game, that's for sure. But UNLV with Haj Malik Williams, his agent or his family or whatever combination is going to tell him to opt out and go in the transfer portal just to force UNLV's hand to pay him some money. So that's what's going to happen, and he might skip his bowl game and come back to UNLV. Who knows? He might play his bowl game too. This is all the stuff with stars that we do not know of yet. So I'm thinking more of like an under-the-radar quarterback, maybe somebody like what's his face on South Alabama? I keep forgetting his name.
Gio Lopez.
Yes, Gio Lopez is a good one. Maybe somebody like that would be someone you want to target for your goal. Information's key, and the first people to get it is going to be the ones that benefit. It's not like you have Adam Schefter tweeting this stuff out. It is different with college. That there's people that find out before the mainstream. So I think that's very important. Illinois, not a bad call either by Rich. So good stuff, good exercise. Let's move on to the NCAA games, my man. And we're going to talk a little bit about everything. And, maybe with let's sake of time, we won't go into too much that we're not going to be betting. But let's start right out with the first game. And that is Jacksonville State. They're hosting Western Kentucky. And I always have to check the line again because I always write it down 4.5, 58. This is what it is. Jacksonville State is a 4.5 favorite. Total is 58. This is played in Jacksonville, right? It's actually going to be played in Mississippi. So I found that interesting. Josh, you have the floor on the first game. What are your thoughts on this?
Yep. Host site is Jacksonville, Alabama for this one, and it's going to be a home game for Jack State. These two teams, we just saw them play last week, and it was a low-scoring battle of field goals and field position. What was real interesting is that in theory, the game really didn't mean much to Jacksonville State as they already had their position locked up and they really had some control over potentially who they wanted to face in that game, because had they won the game, they would have played Sam Houston State in the conference title game. Western Kentucky did sneak in with a win. And so this is a rematch of a game we just saw last week. The real interesting developments for Jack State is that their do-it-all quarterback, Tyler Huff, who's got 1,200 rushing yards on the season and averages 6.1 yards per carry, along with all the passing yards, was hurt about late stages of the third quarter when they continued to have him in there. And so I think it's game time decision for him on if he's going to be able to go, but it's lower leg injury, including the ankle, and he could be severely immobilized. So there's a couple of different things that I'm looking at here. And this one, I already do have my play in it, but I'll just kind of talk through that here a little bit. Jacksonville State is very, very high in tempo. They're pretty highly rated in offensive explosiveness. They really hit the run game super hard. I mean, they've run for 200 or more yards 8 times this year and numerous times over 300 yards rushing. So very, very explosive rushing offense, and they play very, very fast. With the immobilization of Huff, I think we'll see the pace slow a little bit. There's also a lot of magnitude to this conference championship game, so I think that they'll play at a little bit more normal pace. And I think the run game could be hampered a little bit based on what Huff is able to do quarterbacking the team. The pass game is okay, but not exquisite. And we've got a lot of familiarity as these two teams just played last week, and I think that benefits the defense here. 3 times this year, Jacksonville State has played teams that have had relatively competent defenses. All 3 of those games were lower scoring. Last week, the week before that, when they played Sam Houston State, the final was 21-11. And then they played Liberty earlier on the year, was 31-21. So I really have a strong position on the under here. I took the under really early when those lines came out. I think I got 59 and then doubled back at 58.5. I still like it here. This Jacksonville State team, they're going to be run heavy. The clock's going to turn. I think the explosiveness will be limited, and defense will step up enough to where they should finish under the total.
Absolutely. You nailed it. And it's not like their backup Logan Smothers is bad because he's been in the system too. So he understands it. But I have problems here. Lots of problems. I wanted to use Jacksonville State maybe as my sneaky survivor because I didn't want to use Boise State this week. I think they could lose. But I'm thinking that be careful what you wish for is what happened, right? So it's like I think there's 2 ways they could have went into that game last week. Take out Western Kentucky because I don't want to pretend, even though I'm vanilla, I let them in and they beat me. That's a bad thought. Or you try to take them out. I feel they tried to take them out and lost the game. That's what I feel happened. And it was a low-scoring game because Western Kentucky prepared well. But, I mean, you can't be 1-1. These guys just played each other. If they were really being vanilla, they wouldn't have had Tyler Huff out there. Now they injured their quarterback. So if Huff plays, I still have to assume he's hammered. So I still think there's a little bit of a downgrade there, which really worries me. But this really makes me love the under, man. I think the under is a great play. And this was really sticking out when you and I were texting earlier this week. Western Kentucky, even though they don't do well in opponent yards per rush, they somehow figured out the game against Jacksonville State where they were playing their quarterback. I can't imagine that they're playing their quarterback and being vanilla. So the situation now that they tried to beat them and couldn't, that really hurts their confidence. I have to stay away from the side. But there's just a lot of different ways that this game can go under. The Gamecocks are 6-2 against the spread in their last 8 games. Hilltoppers only 1-4, so it's not like I'm super confident that the Hilltoppers are going to win. But I do know that the number of rushing plays that these teams are going to have with Rich Rod, it's going to run the clock. So, long story short, this is an under game, and I think it's more like a 24-21.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, too, for how poorly Jacksonville State's defense has played at times, the last couple games, they've actually really stepped up pretty well. And they held Western Kentucky to 4 field goals here. The red zone defense stepped up against this familiar opponent. So, I think you could see some longer time-consuming drives. The clock is going to chew, and both of these teams could end up kicking red zone field goals, which is great for the under.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's lock that in. Both of us like the under. Current number is 58 on DraftKings for me and you. So we'll go with that, and that's good stuff. Let's move on to the next game. Boise State hosting UNLV. Boise State's -4. Total is 58.5. And I'll start on this one. Great Mountain West Championship game. It's so much better that it wasn't Colorado State in this, and it should have been UNLV. So thank you, Fresno, for taking care of that problem. Unfortunately, it would have been a nice survivor pick for me, but so everyone would have had some Boise State. So whatever, I would have split it with 400 some people. Here's the thing. This is in Albert Stadium in Boise, and everybody thinks the Smurf turf is just such a great home field advantage. I look back and I looked at it since 2010. The Broncos are only 42, 49, and 1 in ATS since 2010, and that's 46.2%. That's more of a losing trend. I almost feel like the market over adjusts for the Smurf turf. Looking at the analytics, I see a path for UNLV here. Both teams are great at running the football, ranking 16th in rush EPA for the Rebels, 6th for the Broncos with Genty. Both rushing defense are kind of around the 50th in opponent rush EPA. Through the air, you might give the advantage to Boise State as they rank 11th in pass EPA to 49th for UNLV. But the other side of the ball shows me the Rebels are better at defending the pass, 45th in pass EPA, while Boise State ranks 81st. So that kind of, cancels each other out. Net yards per play perspective, Rebels plus 1.38, Broncos plus 1.26. I mean, that's very close. I think these schedules have been pretty close too. But even though Maddox Maxon he's been great, a great quarterback. He'll run the ball occasionally, but he's not like Haj Malik Williams. He only has 215 rushing yards. Haj Malik Williams has 768. That's the wild card, I think, that can get to them. And the fact that these teams have played each other, it always makes you look towards the dog. It really does. And UNLV, this is their revenge game. I think 4 points is too much. I took the 4, and I'm fine with that. I maybe it gets to 4.5. If you wait it out, you can try. I'm taking 4 for 2 stars. Any thoughts on this game?
I do have thoughts, and I'll just predicate my thoughts by just letting all of the listeners know there's no groupthink here. We do not share notes beforehand. I like UNLV as well. I put in a position earlier in the week at 4.5. I still like it at 4. There's a couple of things that I really like. I love the familiarity with the opponent, and the last time that UNLV played Boise State, they really held up okay in the trenches against the run. I like the fact that the front seven can get home. UNLV this year on defense, 36 sacks registered and 86 tackles for loss. You mentioned the ball hawks in the secondary, and they have exquisite players. Jalen Catalon is a game changer. Jonathan Baldwin is a lockdown defender. They have 17 interceptions as a group, and so it's been really a defense that is timely in forcing turnovers to eliminate scoring chances or to set up their offense. I like Haj Malik Williams and the dual-purpose nature of his game. 768 rushing yards, and he didn't even play the first 3 games of the season hardly. So imagine what those rushing totals would have been in that situation. We've got Bridge here who chimed in. I think the game is probably lower scoring, and the major pause for me, every wager has risks, and so I don't want to just highlight the good. I do have some substantial concerns with UNLV in the red zone. It's been a bugaboo for them all season. Only 35 touchdowns out of 68 trips. So about 52% touchdown percentage, and they've kicked 21 red zone field goals. They have got to figure a way out to solve the red zone woes, because they're not going to win the game or cover if they're settling for red zone field goals. So I hope they have some things dialed up from the deep depths of the playbook that we haven't seen this year in the red zone to be able to punch it in. They're going to have to. Boise's defense has certainly been less than desirable and has been prone to giving up explosives both on the ground and through the air. I think UNLV will be able to move the football, but I think that they'll be able to hold up okay against Genty as they did in the first meeting, in a game that they have to be kicking themselves for not being able to close out. And the last thing I'll say on it, it was such a critical instance in the game, but UNLV was driving, they got sacked, they ended up punting the ball back to Boise State with 8.5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter and did not see the ball again. Boise went on an 8-minute drive, 14 plays, 48 yards to run out the clock, including several third and fourth down conversions. And I have to assume that that's right in the forefront of UNLV's mind. So I could see some aggressive play calling, a little bit more rolling the dice. And I don't know how much longer Barry Odom will be there, but this is one that they have to show up for and win.
Yeah, 100%. And you nailed it with red zone. That is the big concern. Red zone scoring percentage. UNLV's offense only ranks 85th in red zone scoring. At least they have a red zone touchdown rate ranking 20th. So at least you have that. touchdown percentage, though, for some reason, is 116. So they've had a lot of opportunities, is what this stats is trying to tell you. So we are both on UNLV plus the 4. So we'll both put that down for a play and move on to the next game. So Tulane is facing Army, and Army is plus 4.5, total 45.5. Interesting game. We both see eye to eye on this because this is the one that we did talk about actually last time you were on, right? So, we both like Tulane at the minus 105 that we talked about. There's good reason to, and my handicap is literally a 10-second handicap in this, so I'm gonna let you go first and finish it off.
Yeah, so there's several different things at play. The line on this has been out for a while because these two teams have been locked into the American Conference Championship game for several weeks. And before the results of last week, Tulane was minus 7.5 or even minus 8 against the spread. And so the market is downgrading Tulane significantly for losing to Memphis, who finished 10-2. Had a close loss against Navy and then had a close loss against UTSA in a game they gave away. Memphis is a very, very strong team. It's not a loss that I downgrade Tulane significantly on. And my goodness, the athletes that they have on the defensive line and the skill weapons they have, and they're getting a receiver back now. Tulane is. I think there's just so much explosiveness, and I still believe that while Army has been a great story this season, they are so untested against good competition other than the 5-touchdown loss against Notre Dame, and there's just going to be such a different level of athlete on the field compared to playing Air Force or UAB, Tulsa, Temple, Rice, FAU, the worst of the worst of the worst, right? All bottom 10 teams in FBS. This is just going to be a completely different level of athlete. The other thing that I like is that Tulane's head coach, Sumrall, has faced the option 3 different times as a head coach and has allowed a total of 9 points. And so one thing that we've talked about for years in the Mountain West, there was a guy who coached for New Mexico and San Diego State, Rocky Long, and the book on him was that Rocky Long knew how to stop the option. Well, John Sumrall has had a lot of success this season, or not this season, but a lot of success in recent couple 2 years in facing triple option teams and shutting that down. So they're familiar with the scheme and they've had success defending it. I do not think that they will be caught out of position and have their head spinning like so many teams have while facing Army this season. Tulane's a much, much stronger team.
Tulane minus 4.5 for both of us. You said everything that I was going to say. Yeah, Summerall stops the option. He's done it many times. He did against Navy. I will say Navy's quarterback was hurt that game, but still, it's like, shutting him down 35-0 is something. So I think that's massive. Army hasn't played the week before Army, or this game before Navy's, trying to say the Army-Navy game, since 1943. Navy did this in 2016 in the same spot, and it didn't go well. So great point there. They're always thinking about each other, and that could be the look ahead in this situation, even though it's for a conference championship. It's just crazy how the psychology of college football sometimes gets you. So great call, Reg.
Well, and super unfamiliar territory. Yeah, Bridge brings up a good point. Army hasn't been in a conference for 20 years, and were not competing for conference championships when they were in Conference USA, and they don't play a game the week before the Army-Navy game in, my goodness, now 79 years. They don't play. They always have that time for prep. So that's an interesting caveat to the schedule as well, is that now Army has to not solely focus on Navy, which is so important to them. They've got to squeeze in this conference championship game prep too. So real interesting facet.
Absolutely. My only, if I was going to play devil's advocate, which you always should with your plays, I will say my power ratings only have it at 4.5, 5. It's this a matchup play completely for me and Josh in this situation. I also am a little concerned that everybody seems to be on Tulane. I hate it when I'm on the public side of things. So that is another small concern in this situation. But it's just be hard for me to see Tulane have 2 bad stinkers in a row like this. I think this is a big get-up spot, being that's for the American Athletic Conference. Let's move on to Iowa State. And Iowa State is playing Arizona State. Arizona State -2. Total is 51. And man, do I want ASU to win this game? I was at the BYU game, as you know, and I bet them plus 380 to win the conference, but I'm not going to lie. When I found out about what their best wide receiver, Jordan Tyson, being out with that collarbone fracture, I bought back. And I bought back because I had plus 120. So instead of plus 380, I'm getting plus 280. Okay, that's fine. And I'll make a little money if the other side wins. I am really concerned about that because he has double the catches, over double the catches as the next guy, right? I think Scattleboo is the next guy as a receiver. I really hope that Dillingham gets these kids ready and these backup receivers ready, but that tends to cause chaos, possibly interceptions. And one thing I will say about ASU, they do tend to choke some of their leads away. We've seen it against Mississippi State. We've seen it against Kansas. We've seen it against Kansas State. We've seen it against UCF. We've seen it against BYU. That's what can crush them this game. Other than that, from a matchup perspective, hashtag run the freaking ball. That's all you need to do. Run the ball. Iowa State's defense only ranked 68th in opponent rush success rate and 85th in opponent rush EPA. They give up 5.02 rush yards per attempt. Don't get too cute, Dillingham. I know you're an offensive guru, but you lost your best receiver. This needs to be a scattleboo game. I'm going to give you a lean to ASU -2, but I'm already invested in this game.
Yeah, and further solidify the position, I think that you could also look ASU first half too, right? I think the game plan is going to be to run Scattaboo. I think that they're going to have success while Iowa State's run defense has been okay the last couple of weeks. There's been 4 times this year where they've surrendered 200 yards or more in a game, and for the season, they're averaging allowing 5 yards a carry. So Iowa State's intestinal fortitude on the defensive line has certainly been tested and will be here. The concern is if Iowa State, who has played much better in the second half this year than they have the first half, if they get into the locker room and they're able to make some halftime adjustments, maybe they're down by 10 or 14 and they storm back. As you alluded to, Arizona State has let teams back in it after building some 3-touchdown leads the last couple of weeks. I would be a little bit concerned about a few large momentum swings in the second half. I don't have a position yet on this. And I am very concerned about Tyson being out, as someone just chimed in on, but that's a huge, huge loss for Arizona State. As you're right, I mean, nobody else has any more than no other receiver has 300 yards, right? Scattaboo's the second leading receiver with 468. But Jordan Tyson, 10 touchdowns, 75 catches. That is definitely a concern. I would prefer to take the second half swings and the halftime adjustments out of it. And I'm still looking into this myself, but I would probably isolate the first half and go Sun Devils first half line.
Well, let's call it a lean. Let's call it a lean for you. First half.
Call it a lean.
Sun Devils, and maybe you'll decide later. We can't play every game, so that's good. We'll lean to the first half of the Sun Devils for Josh, and I'm already invested, so I'm going to give you a lean to ASU -2. And I am concerned. This could be a 1, 2, 3-point game for sure, and hopefully the Sun Devils for down here where I live in Arizona, pretty close to Arizona State, win. Forks up, baby. Ohio versus Miami, Ohio. In Miami, Ohio. I wrote down 2.5, but this thing, it looks like it's coming back a little bit. -1.5 now for Miami, Ohio. Total 44.5. So I think you have a play in this one, Josh. I can't remember, or actually you didn't tell me what it was. So why don't you go ahead and break down this game?
Yeah, well, first we'll say that amazingly, Ohio has not won the MAC since 1968. And given all of the talent that the Ohio Bobcats lost, especially on offense last year, Tim Albin is doing a miraculous job with Ohio. And to get his team in this position has been really exceptional. I like Ohio at +2.5 or money line, whatever your preference is, but +2.5, let's call it for the record keeping. I think Ohio is peaking at the right time. This is going to be a low-scoring, slobber knocker type of game here in the MAC. But what I really like is Ohio has been peaking on defense. Last 4 weeks, they're allowing 61 rushing yards per game with a 2.0 yard per carry average. They have significantly better results against common opponents. You look at how they fared against Toledo, Ball State, Eastern Michigan, Kent. I mean, the list goes on and on. They all play each other. And Ohio has had a stronger conference season, with the exception of their lone game against Miami of Ohio earlier this year, which was really something that I can see that this team perhaps learned something from that game. They were down 30-6. They scored a couple touchdowns to make it respectable. I think this is just a major spot for the defense to show up against Miami of Ohio, who, you know what, give them credit. They played really well last week at Bowling Green. Bowling Green threw up a stinker. Their best player, Harold Fannin, was injured and largely ineffective. It really is a coin flip. It's one of those kind of gut plays where I feel like this might be Ohio's year. I think it's been their year all year because they've done more with less than any team in the MAC in a long time. The team is playing really well. They're blowing teams out now. It's largely been non-competitive. It's their first time back to Detroit in a couple years. The last time they played the MAC title game, they were on a backup quarterback. They had several chances to beat Toledo, and they couldn't get it done in a 17-7 loss. I think this is the year Ohio can get over the hump.
I agree. I will say I bought the 3 at minus 120, which made me feel good. I don't feel great about it. The Red Hawks did beat them up pretty bad when they did play each other. Parker Navarro was terrible. He got benched that game. But I also look at what the Bobcats did the last few weeks, and I think that they really improved. And sometimes you got to look at what have you done for me lately. We also talked about you're facing each other again. You always look towards the dog in that situation. Bobcats ranked 53rd in passing success rate compared to Brett Gabbert ranks 40th. So, Gabbert's a little bit better. I'll give him the nod. But the Red Hawks cannot run the ball, ranking 124th in rushing success rate and 88th in rushing EPA. The Bobcats run the ball well, ranking 30th in rush EPA. So I think the Bobcats can run all over this team. And I think that's where Ohio's got the shot to win this outright. They rank 19th in yards per rush. Miami ranks 73rd in opponent rush EPA. That's really where I see the win. Now, they can't get cute. They can't get behind. I don't like Ohio having to chase. I think Ohio should score first, so it's also a good live betting situation. Miami's got a very, very slight large yards per play advantage, 1.57 to 1.23. But I think Ohio's offense is more balanced, ranking 15th in third down conversions. Miami only ranks 122nd in third down percentage. And I think that's kind of important here. If they can't get to a first down, maybe Ohio's a little bit more balanced than that. So that's what I'm thinking. I see it at 2.5 at Circa. I see it at 2.5 at Bet Rivers. There's a couple other books out there, so I'm going to stick with 2.5 here. If it wasn't at those books, I would have had to say 1.5. But 2.5, I personally think you should buy a 3, but I like Ohio as well for 2.5, so we'll make that official for both of us on this play. Let's move on to a much bigger game because Georgia is facing Texas, and this is seeding implications definitely in the playoffs. I think that both of these teams could drop a lot because Georgia almost had that loss last week, as you know, and Georgia will have their third loss, and if they're going to punish SMU for another loss, they better punish Georgia. But Texas, they have no quality wins minus, I guess, Texas A&M, who dropped out of the rankings last week. So that doesn't help for that win either. It's like, my God, you go and win in College Station, and you're not getting that much credit for it. I like Texas, and I feel a little reluctant because I'm going against Kirby Smart in Georgia because this game is played at Mercedes-Benz. It's their backyard. They do so freaking well there. But it's that second game, and I don't like Georgia lately. Losing by 18 points to Ole Miss. I mean, if I want to be like the comedian and say, whoa, look what Miami did lately. Look what Georgia did lately. I mean, it got reffed into that game last week. They should have lost to Georgia Tech. They allowed 21 points to UMass, and UMass was in the red zone. I don't know what happened. They obviously didn't get the touchdown or field goal, but they almost got the 28 against Georgia that game. I was following that. Look at the ATS on Georgia, 3 for 9. They are like one of the bottom 5 worst ATS teams in the nation. Texas, a healthier 7-5. And these are based on the closing number, but I see this number closing probably around this 2.5. I mean, if you look at the pure stats, it leans Texas. Longhorns, they've got 1.18 net yards per play advantage over Georgia. They have a much better defense this year, ranking second in defensive EPA. Georgia ranks 36th in defensive EPA. They took a big hit last week. They have some guys that are injured, some defensive linemen. The numbers say Texas. That's why I took Texas. I kind of like them a little bit in the first half and the full game. Maybe you put a half star in the first half and 1.5 stars for the full game is what I'm going to do. But it wouldn't shock me if Kirby Smart outsmarts Sarkisian. But I just have to go with my numbers here on this one, Josh, and think that Texas, they made a turn last week when they won in College Station. I think they go on the road and do it again. What are your thoughts? Looks like Josh froze up here, so let's see if we can get him back. In the meantime, before Josh is coming back, couple things I want to say about Texas. They got a lot of flack from the committee. I think that that's a motivational factor for them, and I think that that's the reason why they've done so well here down the stretch. So while waiting for Josh to come back, I just think that Georgia showed a lot of susceptibility last game, and I think Georgia, really numbers-wise should lose this game. Here's Josh again. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, so this is one I do have a position on. I did take a +3. I bought a little, paid a little juice, -120, I think, on it. I don't really have a real strong amount of meat and potatoes to solidify my position. And this is usually not necessarily one that I have a real strong take in. But we saw this play out 5 weeks ago, 30-15, and Georgia really showed up and dominated Texas. And I would just be a little bit concerned with Texas based on how their offense has played the last 3 weeks. They really haven't looked overly great against Arkansas, Kentucky, or even A&M. I know it was a hostile environment and a rivalry renewed, but I really would be concerned here facing up against that Georgia front seven who can seemingly turn it on at any time. Now, they played with their food the last 2 weeks. Georgia did against UMass. Then that backup quarterback went up and down the field all game on them, as you had mentioned, in one of those, we're not going to show up spots after beating Tennessee and with Georgia Tech on the horizon. The Georgia Tech game was what a thrilling game that was, and one where Georgia is really, really fortuitous to have won that game. I was stunned to see how Georgia Tech just took it to the Bulldogs in that environment, but they did. So, we'll see here. I could say I don't hate the position that you took on it. I don't have a real lot of rebuttal or hard pushback on that, and this is typically one where I don't put a huge position out there for myself or what I would advise anyone else to do, just given the magnitude of a game between two heavyweight squads. But Georgia, and that it's going to be a home field for them, right? Being in the Mercedes-Benz Dome in Atlanta in a game that they usually show up in. It's really hard to bet against them, although the line is one that clearly the bookies, the oddsmen, have a lot of Texas respect. One question that I would have for you, though, that's super interesting, I think, about the ratings. If Texas were to lose this game, and if Oregon were to lose, who's rated number one? Who gets that number one position?
Funny, someone just put 40-1 on Georgia to be number one. But of course, that would just make the committee more liars, because they said, we're not going to move the teams that are not playing. Notre Dame's ahead of Georgia. So does that mean that Notre Dame goes to number one? They're not. Are you punishing them now? Now you're skipping over them? You said you're not moving them with respect to the other teams. So what does that mean? So I think that if Penn State beats Oregon, they're beating the number one team in the nation as bad as that loss to Ohio State kind of looked from your eyes, I mean, everybody's got a bad loss. I almost think you have to do Penn State, but the committee, nothing surprises me with the bias of the committee. And so I think 40-1 was a dang good shot at it. So I think that but I will go back and say it's going to be Penn State, and they'll put Notre Dame second and Georgia third, because they would just look so freaking bad to the public after putting Alabama in and putting Georgia at number one. That would look so bad optically, right? And
Terrible.
I think at some point they have to think of that. That looks like Ridge likes Georgia a bit and thinks Sark could screw it up. That's possible. And they are off a big effort at top College Station. Or was it that big of an effort? College Texas A&M is kind of incompetent, man. And they've been incompetent all year. I almost feel like Georgia is off the 8 overtime effort. So it's almost like you can use either one for your handicap on that one. So you know what? Let's have this disagreement. Let's put you at Georgia plus 2.5, and I'll do Texas money line at minus 134, and maybe there's a middle in the situation.
Hey, yeah, I'll take a 1-point win for the Horns.
Yeah, let's do it. That would work out perfectly for both of us.
And I'll say this too. Again, we don't share notes, and I like the fact that there's a little bit of disagreement. There's 2 sharp guys here on the show today, and we really look and analyze these games really intently before we go on, and you can see a game playing out a couple different ways, and there's always 2 sides to look at something, and I think that some of that disagreement is really healthy, so it's good to have a little bit of that here and there.
Absolutely. A little disagreement is normal. I mean, that's what makes these shows worth listening to. Let's move on to the next game. Louisiana versus Marshall. Marshall minus 5.5, or no, sorry, Louisiana minus 5.5. Louisiana is the home team here, I believe. Cajun Field in Louisiana. Total is 56.5. Why don't you start with this one?
Yeah, it's one I'll be watching intently because I have a Marshall plus 1,800 ticket to win the Sun Belt that we've got riding on the line here. So nice. I'm still assessing what to do with that, but for now I'm just letting that one play out. And I kind of like Marshall in this game. I think Marshall's been quietly one of the more underrated teams in the Sun Belt all season. They breezed through the majority of their Sun Belt schedule, and they've played really good football against good teams down the stretch. Coastal Carolina, at Old Dominion, at James Madison, and found ways to win those games. Louisiana's on a backup quarterback who's played pretty well, right? Ben Woldridge is out. I think he's out for the season, so it's Fields now, who's played pretty well. I think both of these teams are really going to want to run the ball. Marshall certainly wants to run the ball and has been pretty effective at running the football all season, averaging over 200 yards a game and 5.2 yards per carry. Braylon Braxton has actually played really well at quarterback. He transferred in from Tulsa, 17-2 touchdown to interception ratio, completing 59%, and just really has been careful with the football and has made smart decisions. And so I like that. I think that for me, the Marshall run defense has played really not of late, but over the course of the totality of the whole season, I trust their run defense a little bit more than I do Louisiana's. And I think that they're a much more complete football team, although they've flown under the radar for the majority of the way. Marshall's only conference loss was at Georgia Southern in a game that they led 23-5 with about 2.5 minutes left, and somehow gave up 19 points the final 2.5 minutes to lose by 1 point. Otherwise, they'd have an undefeated conference slate. Louisiana's played many close games, and many of the games that they've been in shouldn't have even been necessarily as close as they were. It's just kind of one of those things where against the number, yeah, I would find what is it now? 6.5, 6?
Is it? It's 5.5 at DraftKings. I mean, if it's a 6, then I'm gonna start making a move. 5.5 at FanDuel, but minus 114. Okay, no, this is moving the direction I was kind of hoping it would move, because I think I'm kind of with you on what you're saying.
Yeah, I think this is a battle between 2 really evenly matched teams, and it wouldn't surprise me at all to see Marshall win this game on the field. I would take the 5.5 or 6 with Marshall in a game that, this one here, there could be a little bit of weather. I'm going to check the sites here. It's a little bit too early to assess weather with still 3 days to go in the forecast, but there was supposed to be a little rain and precipitation in the forecast here, which could add a little bit to it, but both of these teams want to run the football. Louisiana has been really hampered with offensive explosiveness this year. They've kind of been okay and done a few things well, but explosiveness is not one of them. Marshall's much more explosive, and I trust the Marshall run defense to contain Louisiana's rushing attack. I would take Marshall.
Okay, well, I'm seeing too many 5.5s for me to say it's a 6, but I'm going to wait on it because you know what I'm going to do. I would take a 6. It's just not there, so I can't give it out as a play right now. But what I will say is this game bugs me because I do have the Cajuns power rated a few points better than the Herd, but this is the metrics love Marshall. Since Louisiana lost Ben Wooldridge with that broken collarbone, another collarbone injury, right? Chandler Fields stepped in and been great, but look who he's played. He's played Troy and Louisiana Monroe. Mm-hmm. You know, like literally the bottom feeders, it's like, are you going to really use those stats as real? I don't know. And Marshall should be able to run the ball 39th in rush EPA to Louisiana, who ranks a terrible 120th in defensive rush EPA. Neither team is great at stopping the run because Marshall gives up 4.5 yards per attempt. But, I mean, that's when you're looking at the dog. Marshall is the best ATS team in college football. 10-2 against the spread. Yeah, I like Marshall, man. I'm going to wait for a 6, though. I think I'll get it. I'm going to wait for a 6. And this was when I was like first seeing the lines. I'm like, okay, I can't use Boise, can't use Oregon, can't use Tulane because I burned Tulane. I was like, maybe Louisiana. Then I started handicapping the game. I'm like, Jesus, I think I like Marshall. You know, so it put me in a bind here. I'm probably going to have to go with Todd. We'll see. If Huff is back, I'll consider Jacksonville State. We'll get to that. But I'm with you. I'm just going to put it as a lean. Should I put it as a lean or a play for you?
I mean, my goodness. Let's put this as an official play, plus 5.5.
All right, plus 5.5 for Josh. I love it, man. Watch it get smashed at 6 and back down to 4. Penn State, Oregon. Oregon minus 3.5, total 45.5. This is another super quick handicap. I have huge problems because, dude, I look at Penn State. Metrically, their schedule's not that much different than Oregon, and they really are really close to Oregon metrically. I mean, 10th in defensive EPA, Oregon ranking 11th and 13th. You know, 10th and they're 10th and 10th in both offensive and defense. I mean, they're right with Oregon numbers, but they actually the Nittany Lions have an actual plus 0.37 yards per play. But my opposite problem is James Franklin is terrible in big games. You know, so it's just super conflicting here. So I might have something a little bit different for our beer bet bangers. But Penn State should have probably lost at USC, and they probably should have lost at Minnesota if Minnesota didn't kick that stupid field goal, Josh.
Oh, man, yeah. And, Penn State, I'm interested to know mentally kind of where they're at in this situation as they miraculously get into this game after having to psychologically have thought that they were going to get a week off, and who knows how they were going to use that bye week, and the players were going to get some rest and the coaches were going to get out and do some recruiting. And now all of that goes out the window here as they now have to play this game. And I would be really concerned about just the psychological factor of having to jump in now to a game that they weren't really maybe not prepared to play. It's hard to say, right? Like, has Oregon just kind of been going through the motions all season? They had a really tough game at Madison against your Badgers last, I guess it was the 16th, but that was just such a horrific spot too, right? They just one of those really tough.
It was a home run spot for Wisconsin, complete letdown, flat spot for Oregon, and Oregon still got the job done.
Yeah, and I've just been looking at the spots for Oregon all season in situations where it would be appropriate to fade them, and they're just covering every single one of these spots, right? Just blasted Purdue, Illinois, Michigan, Maryland, just dispatched Washington last week with absolute ease. And it looks like it's a team that's kind of starting to ratchet it up and starting to really put themselves in kind of working the muscle and really elevating their performance to what it needs to be in order to compete for a championship, instead of just kind of ho-humming through games that we saw earlier in the year, right? I think earlier in the year, the perception was, well, gosh, they're kind of just screwing around with these teams, right? They almost lost against Boise. They were not a lot of margin against UCLA or Michigan State, squeaked out against Ohio State, but I mean, they are totally ramping it up here. It's one of those things where I feel like the preparation with Oregon, having been expected to play in this game for weeks, will help them. Not to necessarily guarantee they're going to cover 3.5, but I don't have a play on this one yet, but if I had to play this game, I would play Oregon.
Okay, so Ridge says Penn State, worst spot ever, 7th straight conference game, biggest game in 10 years, in a zillion years they can't expect to play. Great points, but here's another thing that you can look at, though, and I'm just being devil's advocate to you. I'm not saying you're wrong, Ridge. This is a house money game for Penn State, too, because, like, they didn't expect to be here. Why not try to win the Big Ten? You know, it's almost like there's like no pressure now. It's Ohio State that screwed up. It wasn't it Oregon thinking Ohio State all the way up till Saturday night that they're like, well, Jesus, I guess it's not Ohio State. Yeah, you know, so you can make arguments on both sides of this. I mean, here's the biggest thing for me, Rich, is James Franklin is a terrible big game guy, you know, and that could just show up again, you know. And so I think that Penn State either wins it outright or gets their ass kicked, you know, and I'll get to that real quick on the beer bet bangers. But I mean, all great points. And Oregon State, yeah, their line could murder Penn State's offensive line. Penn State's offensive line hasn't been as great as it has been in the past. Heisenberg, an awesome name, 420 says, Duck, are you breaking down any FCS or did I miss that already? FCS isn't in the agenda, but we can bring it up quickly at the end if Duck's got one for us.
Yeah, and I'll break down every FCS game this week on Twitter. I'm going to have some time Thursday and Friday night, and so we've got 8 games on the slate for FCS, and I'll break them down in greater depth on Twitter.
All right, great stuff. Let's move to the last game then. Clemson versus SMU. SMU minus 2.5, total 57. So this is such a stressful situation now because SMU just knows, just like Florida State last year, the committee's going to kick them right into the ass. And I think the committee would rather have Alabama in than Georgia at number 1. They would. They just want the 4th SEC because you're getting the 4th Big Ten. That's exactly what's going to happen. It sucks. But guess what? Clemson is not good. And they're not nearly as good as people think. And this is not the Clemson teams of before. I think that Clemson should be thanking Miami to be in this position, but this team got flaws. They have flaws. And I like the Stangs and what they've been doing since that BYU loss. You have to remember that Preston Stone started that game. You know, it was him. It wasn't Kevin Jennings, the star. I saw what SMU did at Louisville. You know, they looked more convincing than Miami against Louisville. I was thinking that I was going to bet SMU against Miami, but now I have an easier time with a small spread. I mean, the Stings have a massive advantage through the air. 5th in pass EPA, 55th for Clemson. Klubnik is a complete failure for this team. The Tigers used to lean on their defense, but this squad only ranks 41st in success rate, 40th in defensive EPA. SMU, who ranks 13th on defensive success rate, 4th in EPA. People are sleeping on SMU. The only way Clemson is going to move the ball on the ground is on the ground, and they rank 14th in yards per rush, but SMU's defense ranks 2nd in yards per rush, allowing 2.8. As long as the Mustangs take care of the ball, that's my only problem. They can't turn over the ball, but if it's equal in turnovers, I like an alt line in this one. I think SMU could blow this team out. I'm not going to give out an alt line. I took this at plus 1.5 when it opened, and I was shocked that it was that. I still like it at minus 2.5 for this show. I'm giving out SMU minus 2.5 for 2.5 stars.
Love it. I think that you've been waiting for Clemson's offense to really turn the corner against good competition several weeks in a row now, and they just can't seem to necessarily do it. You got the brand recognition with Clemson, but there's been some significant chinks in the armor. We saw it against Georgia in week 1. We saw it off a bye when they hosted Louisville and just threw up a complete stinker against Louisville at home. We saw it last week against South Carolina where they had chances to score and couldn't, and then they couldn't get off the field and couldn't stop the run. I think SMU's defensive front is going to really create some problems here. 38 sacks, 88 tackles for loss on the season. They live in the defensive backfield. They create pressures, and Klubnik has not been great when he's pressured, right? And so when you pressure him and when you make him rush his decision-making, there's throwaways, there's balls that bounce in the dirt and bounce to the receivers. They're not hitting the running back out of the backfield. And so this could be a mess for Clemson offensively. And SMU's defensive secondary, I mean, they're ball hawks, man. 16 interceptions on the season, and they really lock down opposing team receivers. And so, yeah, I could see this being a real struggle for Clemson. I think you're going to have the group of bettors out there, right? There's 300,000 bettors annually that are entering in the market with legalization and people getting more interested in it. And you're just going to see those people that chalk it up to, wow, Clemson, they're a dog. Give me Clemson. They're good. They're good. Who's SMU, right? But not so fast. I mean, SMU is super talented on defense. I love what they bring to the table in the trenches. I think they'll more than hold up as they have all season. And this team is peaking at the right time, right? I think they've played really good football the last couple of weeks in preparation for this game. I think SMU will be just fine. Turnovers are so critical in any football game, but if they can limit the turnovers to, maybe one, but if they can protect the football, they should be able to move the ball on the ground. One other concerning thing, Clemson has given up 550 rushing yards the last 2 weeks. And I don't have a lot of takeaways from when teams play FCS, either in week 1 or late in the season. But if you go back and pull the tapes, the Citadel, who's a really weak Southern Conference team, the Citadel, Clemson could not get them off the field in the first half. Citadel was 0-3 in the red zone, but the first 3 Citadel drives ended in the red zone. And chunk plays on the ground, missed tackles for Clemson, running backs making people miss and getting 7, 8, 9 yards per carry. And this is the Citadel. This is undersized military academy, FCS Citadel. And Clemson could not get any push on the defensive line. It was very, very concerning. I could see the Stangs really feasting here.
Yeah, and that's a great call because, Ridge brings up we'll see what happens against the D-line. I don't think Clemson's D-line is as good as it was before, so I kind of like the Ponies' offensive line in the question you have on it. So, yeah, I think SMU could definitely cover with margin. They've been disrespected here, too, by the committee. I think that's another angle. If you take the word Clemson off the helmet and then take the word SMU off the helmet, this is not a 2.5-point spread. This is like a 5 or 6 point spread, This is definitely a much larger spread if you take those names off, in my opinion. And that's what I love playing against in college football. Want to bring something up real quick, Josh. Looks like we're both on SMU, so I'll put you down for that. I forgot to mention that Trevor Etienne is opting out or going into the transfer portal. It's like the season's not even over yet for Georgia. Is that something we should ignore, or is that a weird tell of like how unorganized the team might be?
It's a stunning development, and we're seeing more and more where people are just kind of looking out for themselves, and there's no more real loyalty to the group, and that's really a concerning element of the and an unintended consequence of the NIL and the transfer portal, and people just getting paid far and beyond what the scholarship would cover. So yeah, that is really surprising. I guess I didn't see specifically. Did he declare that he wasn't playing?
So he declared that he's entering the transfer portal already. I guess he just wants to get bids. I'll tell you the exact tweet of what was said. Breaking: Georgia star Trevor Etienne plans to enter the transfer portal. He tells. Okay. So maybe he didn't enter now, but he plans to. That's like the same thing as saying, guys, I'm leaving you no matter what, unless I get paid. It's too early to make that announcement when you are playing for a national championship. So it's ugly.
Really stunning. And that's not a culture that's been curated there at Georgia. So that's really stunning that happened.
Absolutely. Just something to think about for that game. So let's move on to beer bet bangers. And this means any plus money play that you like for the week. It could be any sport. Now, I already alluded to it. I think Penn State either wins or gets blown out. So you could take an alt line on Georgia too, like minus 7.5 would be fat. You know, they have to win by more than that. Obviously, 6.5 would be a little bit scared. I would say that, but I'm just going to stick with Penn State winning it outright. I think you get like plus 140 in some books right now. Plus 145 on DraftKings. They are funny. Army Navy spreads out. Army minus 2.5, minus 120. Plus 138 on FanDuel. We'll call it plus 145 on DraftKings. So I think that, you know, Penn State, the metrically shows, and I think the house money part that, like, oh God, look at, we're here. Let's do something. While Oregon might have been thinking about something else. I don't like how Oregon finished the season that much. I know that they took care of business against a rival in a revenge spot, but that almost makes this more of a letdown spot. You know, the pressure's on Oregon. Penn State's already been thinking they're in the playoffs. They never thought they'd have shot at the Big Ten title. The pressure's on Oregon. I like Penn State for the beer bet banger at plus 145.
Yeah, we've done beer bet bangers all season. It's been a great segment. It's been a lot of fun to kind of have one of those low risk, high reward situations. This week is a little bit unique in the fact that we have close spreads. We have all really strong competitive teams playing. And so there hasn't really been a lot of those beer bet money shot, long shots that we're able to take. But one that I found here, again, we'll go back to Marshall ULL on an alt line. I wouldn't be stunned to see Marshall win the game. And I don't necessarily call it a blowout, but you can grab a minus 6.5, Marshall minus 6.5 alt line, plus 330. Okay. They could win by a touchdown. And so I like Marshall anyway against the regular spread. I think that they're really going to be able to have success. I mean, ULL just 133rd in defensive havoc achieved. They don't really get home. They don't create a lot of negative plays. The run defense, as we alluded to, has been terrible on an EPA basis. I mean, running dogs have been great, and I think Marshall has every chance possible. I could see that situation where they, if they win the game on the field, there's no reason they can't win by a touchdown. So if you're looking to try to get one of those longer shot, plus 330, Marshall minus 6.5 alt line.
All right, dude. Well, I like that because you know what Louisiana did to me last week? They covered against Monroe on a time where the running back should have went down. Monroe had no timeouts left, and he ran 25 yards into the end zone. That prick.
Brutal.
It was, dude. I mean, I've been on the bad end. I was on Duke against Miami when Miami put up like 4 touchdowns and 5 minutes left. I was on San Jose. I was on San Jose State at home against Boise State this year. I've been on the worst bad beats in college football.
Vicious.
Thank God I wasn't on the Cleveland Browns on Monday night. So, I mean, it would have made sense if I was the way that the bad beats have been rolling in for me. But, Josh, any quick NFL before we go?
You know, I will, and I'll just self-admit, NFL is not something that I cap a lot of. I don't spend a lot of time diving into that, so I really can't really give you anything of value in the NFL. But it's certainly going to be fun the rest of the way to see how that shapes up.
Yes, it absolutely will. And Josh, thanks so much for taking the time to come on and talk college football with me. You're very sharp, as our listeners definitely know by now. Where could our listeners and viewers get your great information and plays?
Well, thank you, Kiev. Appreciate the kind words. Yeah, so I'm a writer for the Action Network. I write up about 10 to 12 articles a week for them. I'm on all the major gambling forums, gappingthegame.com, covers.com, the RX forum, and really active on Twitter, pumping out content for people. So you can always reach out to me there as well.
All right, Josh. Thanks again for coming on. Make sure you guys check out Josh on his Twitter at StepOnADuck1. We'll be talking soon, Josh.
Thanks.